The call came at 3:47 a.m. I remember staring at my phone's harsh blue light, my mother's name flashing on the screen like a warning sign. Nobody calls at that hour with good news. My name is Lila, and that call changed everything. He's been arrested, my mother sobbed into the phone. Your brother, Derek. They're saying he stole money.
Miljo.
From his company. Her voice cracked. They took him away in handcuffs. I sat up in bed, my sheets pooling around my waist, and tried to process what I was hearing. Derek, golden child, perfect son, successful finance executive Derek, was in jail? The same Derek who'd spent Christmas dinner bragging about his new promotion? Mom, slow down, I said, running a hand through my tangled hair. What exactly happened? The police showed up at his house an hour ago. Sarah called me. She meant Derek's wife. They're saying he embezzled company funds. But it has to be a mistake. Your brother would never. I bit my tongue. Would never what?
Lie? Cheat?
Steal? The same brother who'd borrowed my college fund and convinced our parents it was a smart investment opportunity? The money that was supposed to be my future vanished along with his promises to pay it back. Where are you now? I asked, already knowing the answer.
Home.
I need you, Lila. Please come. The please caught me off guard. My mother rarely asked for anything, especially from me. Her world had always revolved around Derek's needs, his achievements, his problems. I'll be there in 30 minutes, I said, even as a voice in my head screamed not to get involved. The drive to my childhood home was surreal. Street lights cast orange shadows across my dashboard as I navigated the empty roads, my mind racing faster than my car. Part of me felt guilty for the tiny spark of satisfaction that flickered in my chest. The other part wondered if this was just another mess I'd have to help clean up. When I pulled into the driveway, Mrs. Thompson from next door was already there, still in her floral nightgown, arm around my mother on the front porch. The sight stopped me cold. My perfectly put-together mother, reduced to a crying mess in her silk pajamas, clutching a wadded-up tissue. Oh, thank goodness you're here, Mrs. Thompson said, relief evident in her voice. She'd watched our family drama unfold for years from her kitchen window, probably seeing more than any of us realized. My mother launched herself at me, gripping my arms. We have to help him. He must have had a reason. Derek always has a reason. Mom, I said gently, maybe we should wait until we know more details.
No.
You don't understand. This will ruin him. His career, his reputation. She paused, lower lip trembling. What will people think? There it was. The real crisis wasn't that Derek might have committed a crime. It was that people would know about it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from my Aunt Nora. Saw the news. You okay? Call me when you can. News? My stomach dropped. I pulled out my phone and there it was, already trending locally. Rising finance star Derek Byrne arrested in multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme. Mrs. Byrne, Mrs. Thompson said softly, let's get you inside. I'll make some tea. As I helped guide my mother through the front door, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. I looked exactly how I felt, torn between duty and self-preservation, between family loyalty and the raw truth I'd always known about my brother.
My phone buzzed again.
This time it was a text from an unknown number. Tell Mom I'm sorry. I need help. Please, Lila.
Derek.
Even now, even after everything, he was still trying to pull strings. I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the delete button, when my mother called from inside. Lila? Where are you? I took a deep breath and stepped into the house, leaving the message unanswered. Whatever game Derek was playing this time, I wasn't sure I wanted to be part of it. But as I watched my mother's hands shake while she attempted to make coffee, I realized I might not have a choice. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the kitchen in shades of pink and gold. It was going to be a long day, and somehow I knew this was only the beginning. 3 days after Derek's arrest, I found myself sitting across from my mother at our dining room table, pushing food around my plate while she dropped a bomb that nearly made me choke on my green beans. I want you to go back to college, she said, setting down her fork. I've been looking at the finances, and with some adjustments, we can make it work. The same finances that couldn't support my education 2 years ago when Derek borrowed my college fund. The irony wasn't lost on me.
Now,
I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. In the middle of all this? She reached across the table, her hand trembling slightly. I know the timing seems strange, but maybe this is exactly the right moment. We could both use something positive to focus on. I stared at her outstretched hand, but didn't take it. The evening news played quietly in the background, where Derek's arrest was still making headlines. His company had released a statement about unprecedented financial misconduct, and the amount he'd allegedly stolen kept growing with each report. What about Derek's legal fees? I asked. Won't those be expensive? My mother's face tightened. Your brother, he made his choices. But I made choices too, Lila. Poor ones. When your father died, I let Derek take control of everything because it was easier than facing reality. I didn't protect you. The admission hung in the air between us. In the kitchen, Mrs. Thompson busied herself washing dishes, pretending not to listen. She'd barely left my mother's side since that first night, probably worried about what would happen if she did. My phone buzzed, another message from Derek. I'd been ignoring them all, but they kept coming, each one more desperate than the last. He's still trying to contact you, isn't he? My mother asked, noticing my expression.
yeah.
And nothing. I haven't responded. She nodded slowly, then surprised me by saying, Good. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Through the front window, I spotted Aunt Nora's car in the driveway. My mother's face fell slightly. She and her sister had never seen eye to eye, especially when it came to Derek. I invited her, I said quickly. We need help, Mom. Real help. Nora swept in like a fresh breeze, carrying a laptop and what looked like legal documents. She hugged me tight, then faced my mother. Evelyn, we need to talk about damage control. The press is having a field day, and Sarah's family is threatening to go public with some stories about Derek that you really don't want getting out. My mother paled. What stories? Let's just say the embezzlement might not be his only creative accounting project. Nora set her materials on the table. And Lila, honey, you should hear this too. It affects you. Mrs. Thompson quietly excused herself, but not before squeezing my shoulder supportively. As she left, I caught a glimpse of reporters gathering at the end of our driveway. They'd been circling like vultures since the arrest. Before we start, my mother interrupted, I've just told Lila she can go back to school. I'm fixing things. Nora's eyebrows shot up. Really? And how exactly are you planning to pay for that? I have savings. The savings you've been sending to Derek every month. Nora cut in sharply. Don't look surprised, Evelyn. I'm your sister. I know about the transfers. My stomach lurched. What transfers? The silence that followed was deafening. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes, but her hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together. Mom, I pressed, my voice barely a whisper. What transfers? He needed help, she finally said. After the investment thing went wrong. He was in trouble. Real trouble. I couldn't let him. I stood up, so quickly my chair toppled backward. You've been sending him money? All this time? Well, I've been working 2 jobs just to afford my apartment. Lila, please. How much? Nora answered for her. Almost everything, isn't that right, Evelyn? The life insurance from your father, the retirement fund. I didn't wait to hear more. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, my mother's pleas following me down the hallway. Outside, the reporters perked up, cameras raising. But I had somewhere else to be. It was time to pay my brother a visit. The county jail smelled like despair and cheap disinfectant. I sat in the visitors' area, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, watching my brother through the reinforced glass. Derek looked smaller somehow, his designer suit replaced by an orange jumpsuit that made his skin appear sallow. I didn't think you'd come, he said, his voice crackling through the phone receiver. Neither did I. I studied his face, searching for any sign of remorse. Mom's been sending you money. He had the decency to look away. I needed help. So did I. The words came out sharper than I intended. When you took my college fund, when I had to drop out, when I was working double shifts at the diner, where was my help, Derek? A muscle twitched in his jaw. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I had a plan. You always have a plan. He leaned forward, pressing his hand against the glass. Listen, there's something you need to know. About Dad's accident.
The door behind me pushed open.
I turned to see Sarah, Derek's wife, storming in with a manila envelope. Her mascara was smeared, and her normally perfect hair was disheveled. You bastard, she spat at Derek. I found the other accounts. Derek's face went ash white. Sarah, wait. Not just the company's money, but your parents' savings? Your sister's future? She slapped the envelope against the glass. And now I find out you've been funneling money to some woman in Phoenix? My head snapped up. What woman? Sarah, please, Derek begged, but she was already pulling documents from the envelope, pressing them against the glass. Bank statements, hotel receipts, a lease agreement. All in the name of Christine Weber. Sarah's voice cracked. 3 years, Derek. While I was planning our family, you were building a life with someone else. The room started spinning. Christine Weber. The name hit me like a physical blow. Dad's accident had happened near Phoenix. He'd been there on business, or at least that's what Derek had told us. He'd been the one to identify the body, handle the arrangements, manage the estate. What did you do? I whispered, the pieces falling into place with horrifying clarity. Derek's eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw real fear in them. Lila, I can explain. I stood up so fast my chair clattered backward. Did Dad know? About Christine? About the money? He was going to ruin everything, Derek said quietly. He found out about the initial embezzlement, threatened to go to the board. I just needed him to listen, to understand. Oh my God. Sarah stumbled backward, one hand covering her mouth. The brake lines. They said the brake lines were tampered with. The room went silent except for the buzzing fluorescent lights overhead. I felt bile rising in my throat as memories flooded back. Derek insisting on handling Dad's car after the accident, refusing to let Mom see the body, rushing through the funeral arrangements. I'm calling the police, Sarah announced, already pulling out her phone. They won't believe you, Derek said, but his voice wavered. There's no proof. I thought of Mom at home, still defending him, still believing in her golden child. I thought of the years of manipulation, the stolen opportunities, the lies that had shaped our family. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone and stopping the recording I'd been making since I sat down, there is. Derek's face contorted with rage. He slammed his fist against the glass, making me jump. You don't understand what it's like, he shouted. Always having to be perfect, always having to succeed. Dad was going to take everything away. A guard appeared, attracted by the commotion. As they led Derek away, still shouting, I turned to Sarah. We need to talk to Aunt Nora. She's a lawyer. Sarah nodded numbly, clutching the envelope of evidence. What about your mother? I thought of Mom, who had given everything to protect Derek, who had chosen him over and over again. The truth would destroy her. But as I walked out of the jail, my phone heavy with Derek's confession, I realized some destructions were necessary. Some things needed to break before they could be rebuilt. My phone buzzed, a text from Mia. You okay? Need backup. For the first time in days, I felt something close to strength. Yes, I typed back. To both. The recording of Derek's confession sat like a loaded gun on Aunt Nora's desk. We'd been in her home office for hours, the sky outside fading from afternoon to evening, while she made calls and took notes. Sarah had gone home to pack her things, leaving behind the envelope of evidence that now spread across the mahogany desktop like a roadmap of betrayal. The police want to reopen the investigation into your father's death, Nora said, hanging up her phone. But they're worried about the timing. Defense could argue the confession was coerced. I stared at the framed family photo on her wall, Dad's last Christmas. Derek standing proudly between our parents, while I lingered at the edge of the frame. What about Mom? She needs to know. Your mother's blood pressure has been through the roof, Nora replied, shuffling papers. The doctor called me yesterday. She's not sleeping, barely eating. My phone buzzed. Mia again. Found something interesting about Christine Weber. Call me. I have to tell her, I said, standing up. She deserves the truth. Nora caught my arm. Lila, wait. There's something else you need to see first. She pulled out an old leather folder. I found these in your father's safety deposit box. He made me promise to keep them sealed unless something happened to him under suspicious circumstances. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Derek at various ATMs, meeting with shady-looking men, entering hotels. And financial records showing money movements that started long before Dad's death. He was building a case, Nora explained, against his own son. My hands shook as I flipped through the evidence. Why didn't he go to the police? Because of your mother. He knew it would destroy her. Nora's voice softened. He was trying to handle it privately, force Derek into rehab and counseling. The last entry in his journal mentions a confrontation planned for the day he died. The doorbell rang, making us both jump. Through the window, I saw Mom's car in the driveway. I called her, Nora admitted. She needs to be here for this. Mom looked smaller somehow as she entered the office, her shoulders hunched against invisible weight. Her eyes fixed on the photos spread across the desk. What is all this? Mom, maybe you should sit.
No.
Her voice was surprisingly firm. I've been sitting for years. Sitting and watching and making excuses. She picked up one of the photos. Tell me. So I did. Everything. The confession, Christine Weber, Dad's investigation. With each revelation, I watched another piece of her world crumble. When I finished, she walked to Nora's window and stood there, silent, staring out at nothing. The tension stretched until I couldn't bear it. Mom, I knew, she whispered. Not everything, but I knew something was wrong. The way Derek changed after your father started questioning his expenses. The late-night phone calls. The way he insisted on handling everything after the accident. She turned to face us, tears streaming down her face. But I couldn't let myself believe it. Because if I did... Her knees buckled. I rushed forward, catching her before she fell. As I held her, I felt her whole body shaking with sobs. I failed you both, she gasped. I failed your father. All these years, protecting the wrong person.
My phone buzzed again.
Mia had sent a photo. Christine Weber's driver's license. The woman in the picture was young, blonde, pregnant. The issue date was 3 months before Dad's death. Mom, I said gently, there's more. But before I could continue, Mom's body went rigid. Her hand clutched her chest, face contorting in pain. Mom. Nora was already dialing 911 as Mom collapsed in my arms, her breathing shallow and erratic. As we waited for the ambulance, I held her hand, watching her struggle for each breath, and realized that Derek's true revenge might not be against Dad or me, but against the one person who had sacrificed everything to protect him. The sirens wailed in the distance as I made a decision. The truth could wait. Right now, keeping Mom alive was all that mattered. But somewhere in Phoenix, a woman named Christine Weber had answers I needed, and I was done waiting for them to find me. The funeral home smelled like artificial flowers and regret. I stood at the podium, staring at the faces of mourners who'd come to say goodbye to my mother, wondering how many of them knew the truth about what had killed her. The official cause was a heart attack, but I knew better. It was the weight of secrets that had finally crushed her. Derek wasn't there. His lawyer had requested temporary release to attend, but the judge denied it. Just as well, I wasn't sure I could look at him without screaming. My mother, I started, then stopped as my voice cracked. Aunt Nora squeezed my hand from her seat in the front row. My mother lived her life, trying to protect everyone she loved. Sometimes, that meant protecting people from themselves. The words felt hollow, inadequate. How do you eulogize someone whose last conscious moments were spent realizing their entire life had been built on lies? Mrs. Thompson dabbed at her eyes in the third row. Next to her, Mia sat straight-backed, watching me with concern. She'd postponed her trip to Phoenix to be here, though we both knew Christine Weber wasn't going anywhere. In her final days, I continued, my mother learned the cost of unconditional love. She learned that sometimes the people we protect the most are the ones who. The back door of the funeral home creaked open. Sarah slipped in, looking uncomfortable in her black dress. But it was the man behind her that made my blood run cold. Tall, blonde, wearing an expensive suit. He could have been Derek's twin, just 20 years older. Christine Weber's husband. He had to be. My hands gripped the podium so tight my knuckles went white. The resemblance to my father was uncanny, down to the way he carried himself. Suddenly, Dad's business trips to Phoenix took on a whole new meaning. Lila. Nora whispered from below. Do you need a moment? I shook my head, forcing myself to continue. My mother believed in second chances, in forgiveness, in family. The words tasted bitter. But she also taught me, in the end, that there's a difference between forgiveness and enabling, between love and blind devotion. After the service, I watched as Christine's husband slipped out without speaking to anyone. Sarah caught my eye across the room and nodded slightly. She'd seen him too. She knew what it meant. You holding up okay? Mia appeared at my elbow, offering a cup of coffee. Did you know? I asked. About him? Is that what you found in Phoenix? She hesitated. Christine Weber died 6 months ago. Cancer. But before she died, she left something for you. A letter. The coffee cup nearly slipped from my hand.
What?
It's in my car. I was waiting until after. She gestured at the funeral home. There's more, Lila. About your father, about Derek. Things that change everything. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I'm sorry about Mom. We need to talk.
D.
I showed it to Mia. He's using the prison phone system. They monitor everything. Maybe that's the point, she said quietly. Maybe he wants a record of what he's about to say. The funeral home was emptying out, mourners filing past with murmured condolences. Mrs. Thompson hugged me tight, whispering, Your mother loved you more than you know. Aunt Nora was dealing with the funeral director, her lawyer face firmly in place. I looked down at my phone again, at Derek's message. Then at Christine's husband, now sitting in his car across the street, watching the funeral home. At Sarah, clutching her envelope of evidence. At Mia, with a dead woman's letter burning a hole in her purse. Everyone had pieces of the truth. Everyone except me. I need to see him, I said finally. One last time. Are you sure? Mia asked. After what he did to your parents? I thought of Mom's last moments, of Dad's investigation, of Derek's desperate confession, of Christine Weber, who died with secrets I was only beginning to understand. Yes, I replied, watching Christine's husband drive away. Because I think our brother might not be the only child Derek Burns Sr. abandoned in Phoenix. The truth was a puzzle, and I finally had all the pieces. I just wasn't sure I was ready for the picture they would reveal. Christine Weber's letter sat unopened in my lap as I waited in the prison visiting area. The envelope felt heavy, like it contained more than just paper. More than just truth. Miss Byrne? The guard's voice startled me. He's ready. Derek looked worse than before. The orange jumpsuit hung loose on his frame, and dark circles ringed his eyes. But when he smiled, I saw our father's ghost. You got my message, he said, settling into the chair across the glass. I got a lot of messages lately. I held up Christine's envelope, including this. The color drained from his face. Where did you get that? Her daughter brought it to Mom's funeral. The one you couldn't attend. I watched his reaction carefully. Our sister, Derek. Did you know about her? He pressed his hand against the glass. Lila, don't open that letter.
Please.
You don't understand what's at stake. What's at stake is the truth. About Dad, about the money, about why you... The prison doors burst open. Sarah stormed in, followed by 2 police officers and a man in a suit I recognized as Derek's lawyer. Stop her, Derek shouted, jumping up. The letter's evidence. She can't. But I was already tearing it open. Inside was a single photograph and a USB drive. The photo showed Dad with Christine and a teenage girl, all smiling at the camera. On the back, in faded ink, Family Secret DB. Junior.
Knows.
Keeping quiet costs $50,000 per month. My hands shook. You were blackmailing Dad? He deserved it. Derek's mask finally cracked. He abandoned them, her and Emma. Paid them off to keep quiet while playing perfect father with us. When I found out, so you killed him? The words felt like glass in my throat. Your own father? He was going to cut them off. Tell Mom everything. I couldn't let him destroy our family. Sarah stepped forward. That's not why you killed him, Derek. Tell her the rest. Derek slumped in his chair. Emma?
She was sick.
Needed expensive treatments. Dad refused to help unless I came clean about the embezzlement. Said he'd only pay if I turned myself in. The photograph crumpled in my fist. So you chose murder over confession. I chose family. He slammed his hand against the glass. Everything I did was to protect. Your inheritance, Sarah interrupted. Tell her about the will, Derek. About what happens to the estate if your father's second family ever came to light. The pieces clicked into place. Dad's investigation, the missing money, Derek's desperate need to keep everything hidden. It wasn't about protecting anyone, it was about protecting his claim to the fortune. Mrs. Byrne, the lawyer interjected, that USB drive contains privileged information. If you turn it over now. I stood up, backing away from the glass. Emma's dying, isn't she? That's why Christine wrote this letter before she died. She wanted her daughter to have a chance. Derek's face twisted. Lila, please. That money is our legacy. Our birthright. Don't throw it away on some stranger. She's our sister. The words echoed through the visiting room. And you let Dad die to keep her suffering. The officers moved toward me, but I was already heading for the door. Derek's shouts followed me down the corridor. You can't prove anything. The evidence is circumstantial. Outside, Mia waited in her car. Did you get what you needed? I plugged the USB drive into her laptop. Documents filled the screen, bank statements, emails, photos. A complete record of Derek's schemes, preserved by a dying mother for her daughter's future. Take me to Phoenix, I said quietly. It's time Emma met her family. As we pulled away, my phone lit up with messages from Derek's lawyer. Threats, promises, warnings. I turned it off, watching the prison disappear in the rearview mirror. The truth hadn't set anyone free. But maybe, just maybe, it could save one last life. Behind us, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. Somehow, I knew the worst was still to come. The Phoenix summer hit like a wall of heat as I stood outside Emma's hospital room. Through the window, I could see her, 17, pale, hooked up to machines that beeped steadily. She had Dad's eyes. She doesn't know you're coming, her stepfather said, standing beside me. Or about any of this. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Aunt Nora. Derek's been released on bail. Sarah posted it. They're heading your way. My hands clenched around Christine's USB drive. Of course they were. She needs to know, I said, pushing the door open. Emma looked up from her book, confusion crossing her face. Can I help you? My name is Lila Byrne. The words felt strange, heavy with meaning. I'm your sister. Her book slipped from her fingers.
What?
Footsteps thundered down the hallway. Derek burst in, Sarah close behind him. He looked wild, desperate, a cornered animal. Don't listen to her, he said to Emma. She's lying. I pulled out the photograph. Dad visited you every month, didn't he? Business trips, he called them. Emma's hands shook as she took the picture. How did you? Your mother left evidence. I continued, watching Derek's face. About the blackmail, about Dad's death, about everything. Shut up. Derek lunged forward, but Sarah grabbed his arm. It's over, she said quietly. The police are already reviewing the USB files. Emma's monitors beeped faster. I don't understand. What does this have to do with my treatment stopping? Tell her, Derek. My voice was ice. Tell her how you killed Dad when he tried to help her. How you'd rather see your sister die than risk losing your inheritance. Sister? Emma whispered. But Mom said my father was dead.
He is.
Derek's mask finally cracked. Because he was weak. He was going to throw everything away, our reputation, our legacy, for what? Some mistake he made 20 years ago. Emma flinched like she'd been slapped. Her stepfather moved protectively closer. You're the mistake, I said, stepping between them. Everything you touch turns toxic. You killed Dad, broke Mom's heart, stole my future. All to protect your precious legacy. Well, here's your legacy, Derek. Look at her. Really look at her. For a moment, silence filled the room except for the steady beep of machines. Emma's face, Dad's eyes, Mom's chin, Derek's stubborn set to her jaw, reflected back at us like a mirror of shared blood. I can fix this, Derek said suddenly.
Emma leasing.
Once I access the estate funds. You won't be accessing anything. Aunt Nora appeared in the doorway, holding up a document. Your mother's final amendment to her will. Everything goes to Lila, with explicit instructions regarding Emma's care. Derek's face contorted. You're lying. No more lies, Sarah said, releasing his arm. I'm done protecting you. She turned to Emma. Your mother kept records of everything. The blackmail, the threats, the sabotaged brake lines. Get out. Emma's voice was quiet but firm. All of you. Except. She looked at me. Except my sister. Derek moved toward her, but two police officers appeared behind Nora. This time, when they reached for him, Sarah didn't stop them. You don't understand, he called as they led him away. I did it for us. For the family. No, I said, watching him go. You did it for yourself. You always did. When the room cleared, I sat beside Emma's bed. She held up the photograph, studying Dad's face. He wanted to help, I said softly. In the end, he chose you. And now, I took her hand, feeling the family resemblance in her grip. Now we choose each other. Outside, the Arizona sun painted the sky in shades of redemption. Derek's shouts echoed down the corridor, fading like the last traces of his power over us. In their place, something new began to grow. Something built not on lies and manipulation, but on the truth we'd finally uncovered. Emma squeezed my hand and I squeezed back. Some legacies, it turned out, were worth more than money. 6 months after Derek's conviction, I stood in our family home's entryway, surrounded by moving boxes and fresh paint. Emma's latest scan results lay on the coffee table, cancer-free. The doctors called it. Amazing what proper medical care could do when money wasn't an obstacle. Mrs. Thompson appeared at the door with a casserole, like she had every Wednesday since Mom died. The place looks different, she said, taking in the changes. But good different. I'd torn down the heavy curtains Mom always insisted on keeping closed, letting sunlight stream through the windows. Dad's old study, where Derek had plotted his schemes, was now Emma's room for when she visited from Phoenix. Found something interesting while packing up Derek's old room, Mrs. Thompson continued, setting down the casserole. She pulled an envelope from her pocket, yellowed with age, addressed to Derek in Dad's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. The letter was dated the day before Dad died. Son, I know about the money. All of it.
But more importantly, I know why.
The constant pressure to be perfect, to carry the family name, that was my failure, not yours. I pushed you too hard, loved you too blindly, and in doing so, I failed to see the damage I was causing. Tomorrow, I'm going to make things right. With Christine, with Emma, with our whole family. It's time for truth, no matter the cost. I hope you'll understand someday that real legacy isn't about money or reputation. It's about the choices we make when facing our mistakes.
Love, Dad.
The doorbell rang before I could process what I'd read. Sarah stood on the porch, looking uncertain. The divorce is final, she said without preamble. And Derek asked me to give you this. Another letter, this one written on prison stationery. Lila. I read Dad's letter. The one he never got to give me. The guards let me keep it in my cell, a reminder of what I destroyed, trying to be something I wasn't. I can't undo what I did. To Dad, to Mom, to you, and Emma. But I'm trying to understand it. The therapist here says fear of inadequacy can make monsters of men. I think she's right. Take care of our sister. She deserves the family I never knew how to be. Derek. Sarah shifted awkwardly. He's different now. Quieter. Sometimes he talks about Dad like he finally sees him as a person. I finished. Not just a standard to live up to. After Sarah left, I walked through the house, touching the walls that held so many secrets. In the kitchen, Mom's recipe box sat open to her favorite cookie recipe, the one she'd make whenever one of us was sad. In Dad's study, now Emma's room, photos of all three of us siblings hung on the wall, the past and present merged into something new. My phone buzzed, a text from Mia. Ready for your first day back at college tomorrow? I smiled, remembering Mom's last attempt to make things right. The tuition she'd set aside wasn't just money, it was permission to become whoever I needed to be. Aunt Nora arrived later with dinner and legal papers. The trust for Emma's medical care is set up, she said. And the house is officially in your name. What about Derek's share? He signed it over. Said something about earning his own legacy. As the evening sun painted the walls gold, I opened all the windows, letting fresh air sweep through rooms that had held stale secrets for too long. Mrs. Thompson's casserole warmed in the oven, filling the house with the scent of normal life. On my desk lay my college acceptance letter and a photo of Emma at her last hospital checkup, both of us grinning at the camera. Next to it, Dad's letter to Derek and Derek's letter to me. Bookends to a story of destruction and redemption. Some wounds would never fully heal. Some trusts couldn't be rebuilt. But as I stood in my transformed home, I realized that maybe that was okay. Sometimes the broken pieces make something stronger when reassembled into something new. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but full of possibility. And this time, I was ready to write my own story.